back in the Jeep again. So in the last video I mentioned that I was working on the radio, and somebody in the comments had asked for more information on it, so I guess I'll just film the install. So I'll kind of show you what I'm working on right now, and then we'll hopefully dive into the actual install here in a minute. Okay, so obviously that's where our radio went. The kit I got is from Retro Sound, and it includes a bunch of brackets and stuff. It's kind of a universal thing. I'll show you the radio here in a minute. But part of it is this little strap back here, and that's to help hold the radio. It's not like a normal radio where the posts and things are affixed to the radio. They're kind of on these little tabs and stuff. They're not really meant to be structural, so that you can't just screw it in like you did the old one and have it hang off the posts. You actually have to support it. I think the one that was in here was actually supported too, but it should have been, but it was much more structurally robust, we'll say, than the current one, the new one. Not that that's bad, it's a completely different design, and you'll see why when I show you the radio. But the Commando didn't really have a good spot to mount that. You can't really get a camera up in here to show you where it's connected, but it loops up. There are, I can't really show them, but anyway, there's bolts up here like these that actually hold the windshield frame in. And what I did was I hogged out the hole in the frame and the little thing there, and was able to stick it on. These bolts go all the way through into that cavity down here, the cowl. So from underneath, you could actually see them sticking through. I was able to hook it on there and found a nut big enough to screw that on and hold it in place. So that part's done. I have to do something similar for the speaker. There's like 4 little posts back here that are welded to the back of the dash. Those little things were meant to hold a cardboard bracket that is supposed to mount the speaker to the bracket. The bracket mounts to the dash, and you're good to go. This actually did have the cardboard piece in it, but it's too brittle and too worn out. It's never had a radio installed in it, a speaker that I can tell. That radio, I must not have been hooked up to anything, but I can't use it. It's just not, it's cardboard, it's falling apart. It's kind of the same material the headliner, was made out of, that pasty cardboard, pasteboard, whatever. So while it's still in one piece, it's not structurally strong enough. So they include a strap similar to that that's much thicker that you can use. You kind of hook it across the back of the speaker and however you attach it. So I got to figure that out. And then you have to wire the whole thing. It comes with a wiring harness, and I'll show you all that. But what I need to do now, so really long intro, is I don't have a faceplate. I think I might have mentioned that. But you can also see where one was. And I'm just going to run it without a faceplate. I don't really care about the faceplate. The only reason I wanted a faceplate was because of this, to cover this up. This is like from the old faceplate grinding on the metal. But what I'm doing now is just using glass cleaner, scrubby sponge, and shop towels to try to get it off of there, so I can just put the radio up here without the faceplate. I think it'll look fine. It'll be okay for now. Faceplates are like $30, and they don't really have one in stock that they say will fit this. So I don't want to spend $30 and not have it fit. So I'm going to go this route for now, just kind of keep it a little more minimal. Who knows, I might love the way it looks. But that's what I'm working on. I'm going to get this all off, and then we'll start on the actual radio install. I'll bring that out. I'll show you the bits and pieces. And it's a pretty neat kit, to be honest. It's pretty neat. But got to start here first and get everything ready, and then get the radio in. That's about as clean as I'm going to try to get that. It's starting to take the paint off. The scrubber is, so I'm just going to leave it. Good enough. So here's the actual radio, and I got the cheapest one they have. I think it's the 1A is the cheapest one. So they sell some that have Bluetooth built in and satellite radio ready and all that stuff. This is not that one. I just wanted a radio that will do FM, AM, and has an aux port for my phone or iPod or Zune, you know, whatever interesting device you want to plug into it. So it's a pretty simple little dude here. So the radio itself is just this unit with the wires. The faceplate bolts on separately, and I guess that's so if you want the shiny buttons or the black buttons or different shapes or whatever. There's little bolts, or screws rather. There's 2 on each side that hold this on, and there's just a little like cable that plugs into the body. And this is kind of what you're seeing now, what I was talking about earlier, how the posts aren't really part of the radio. They attach via these little wings that are adjustable up and down, in and out. It does come with a different set of wings too, I think. I can't remember. It's been a couple months since I actually put this together. So you can adjust the depth on both sides. You can adjust the width inside the ears, and then all that corresponds with, I'll put it in here backwards just to show you, but you know, corresponds with how it fits in the holes. So you should want them centered in the holes. I was fortunate to have a radio that was already in there, so I just literally took it out, lined them up, and this is kind of sized to match the Motorola AM radio that came out. On the back you have the attachment stud for the strap there, the mount, support strap, their wiring harness. There's your antenna, so that's going to hook up to the if you have an antenna out there, mine's broken, but I have a new one to plug in, but that's for that. And then there's the little aux port. They labeled them too, aux in. I don't think the antenna has a label. Aux in. And that's really it. So like, you know, you can get different faceplates and stuff, and I guess that's how they accommodate that. So the radio body itself, I guess, has the features, you know, if you get just the AM FM with aux, or if you get Bluetooth or satellite radio, you know, that's built into this guy. You can pick your faceplates, and then the wheels, just the little encoders here just plug in. They're kind of universal. So that's the body. It does come with this wiring harness, which I actually have gone through, and is actually awesome how they've done this. Everything, out of the sun here, everything is labeled, the color, where it's meant to go. That's for the speakers, or speaker in my case. There's more here to tell you kind of where things go. And a nice thing is, excuse me, they've already cut the wire, so you don't have to try to strip it and then end up cutting 2/3 of the way through the wire. At least that's what I always do. They've already kind of cut the insulation, so you can just peel them off. And then if you're not going to use it, like in my case, I'm not going to use all of the wires. I'll just throw some electrical tape over it. This is what plugs into the radio. So it just, you know, plugs into the back here. And then if you ever take the radio out, like in my case, I am going to have to take the radio and the speaker back out, because when I start pounding these dents out, I don't want that to get rattled loose. Probably going to take the speedometer and stuff out too. But so in the event that ever happens, you can just disconnect it. It actually came as these were not plugged in. I plugged them in just to keep them together, but they're even, I want to say they're keyed too. Oh wait, no, they weren't keyed. The speaker and the power, you just look at the pins and determine which side of this main plug it goes into, but it's even got a fuse in it. It's kind of neat. What else do they include? You've got an assortment of little spacers and nuts and bolts and screws and things, rubber grommets. Depending on how you need to mount it, they give you an additional not a faceplate, but it's kind of a spacer. So if your hole is bigger than the face on the radio, you can put that in there to help fill the space. This is the exact size as that, so I don't need it. comes with all the instructions and everything you need. The radio itself comes with another set of instructions that tell you how to operate the radio. It comes with you see the chrome buttons. I got the chrome surrounds for the back, and then the knobs themselves. You'll see all these when I start putting it together, but all in all, pretty neat little kit. Could include some spacers here too. In my case, I'll probably use like these right here to sit between the washer at the front and the paint, just so to give it a little more structure. But yeah, all in all, pretty neat little kit. Pretty simple. It's kind of like Legos. Like, you got to put all this stuff together. It comes in multiple boxes and stuff. But the instructions are good. It's kind of fiddly getting the depth and the width and everything adjusted on these, making sure they're right, they match each other. And then test fitting it in the car to make sure that it's actually going to look right. I still don't know if it's going to be a perfect fit. I may have to adjust it, but who cares, right? It'll be a good start. It should sound good. I hope. I'll show you the speaker, but I've got one little speaker that goes in here. It's like a 4x10 or some weird size. I guess it's an old car thing. Back in the 70s, they had one speaker in the dashboard. So the one that I got also works on like Javelins and AMC, AMXs, Gremlins, those sorts of things. All right, so there's the little guy installed, kind of. I went with these little plastic spacers on the outside just to help, because the nut was almost the same size as that hole. I tried to get it as centered as I could, top to bottom, side to side. It's not perfect. This post is like, you can see how much sticks out there and how much sticks out there. This one's a little longer, but ultimately, I mean, like the rest of the car is pretty well falling apart. So little chrome rings go on there. They've got little bits on there, and then the knobs are going to go on. There's two of them, so I'm going to get those together. But I do want to try. I'm going to try to get up under the dash and show you kind of how this is installed. It's a really fiddly, and it's nothing to do with the radio specifically. They're all like this. There's nothing against this specific one, and it's not really bad. It's just fiddly. But I'll see if I can get a little light under here, and I'll see if I can show you what it looks like under there now that it's kind of in place. You can see the strap comes in here, and that actually goes up, like I said, up to the top. These little guys kind of bolt in back here. It's this back. And the other side's over here. So what I've done is I've got these little plastic spacers, a washer and a nut on there. This one, I didn't get it quite adjusted right. It's a little further out. This side I've already done. But effectively, you just take the little back guy, it's keyed, and then the knob here. I did have to go online and look at their website to see how the knobs go on, like which one goes where. They sell so many different kinds. The instructions didn't really say. Push that on there really tight. One thing I noticed about this, and I don't see any way to make it better, is because these knobs and their buttons, you have to push them. They have to be able to go in. You can't get them tight against this. Like, it's a little loose on there. I mean, it's not coming off, but it just has like play in it, which I've tried numerous different combinations of washers and spacers, and ultimately it comes down to, if you get it tight enough that this doesn't move, then you can't push the button, and both of these are buttons. So I don't know. I'm not going to worry about it. It's not going anywhere, and these shouldn't fall off. These little guys, I got to read the instructions to see how all this stuff works, but it's in here, it's done. Well, it's mechanically in here. I have to get all the wiring done, all this stuff, like we looked at earlier. So we'll do that. But at this point, that's gonna have to be a different day because we're out of time today. All right, it's a new day, another bit of time on the radio here. I got this installed, like I said. The only thing I think I might try to work on is, you see how jiggly these are? I can't remember if I can plane divide it or not, but it's not so much the fact that these don't push on far enough, because they have to be able to press. The issue, I think, is that these are just so loose on that shaft. So I might try to put like one little wrap of electrical tape around the post or something and take up that space, so these are nice and pressed on the shaft, kind of like these knobs are. They don't really want to come off unless you yank on them. So I'm going to try that, but for right now it works. I've been driving it around today with this in here, and nothing has rattled loose or come loose. So that's been fine. But for now, that's as far as I'm going to get on that. I got to address the speaker next, and then the wiring, and make sure this thing will fit in here. So let me show you what that's all about. So this is the speaker. Move it over here to the light. This is the speaker I got. And there's one specific reason I got it, and it's because it was the cheapest one I could find in this size. Short of going to like a Kenwood Pioneer, I think, had some this size, but they were about the same price. The only difference was that it came with a pair of speakers instead of just the one. So in theory, I probably could have saved a little money doing that. I would have had a pair of them. But to be honest, I don't need a pair of them. The Jeep only has one spot for a speaker. So short of, like, some people will cut holes in the kick panel here, or you know, in the door panels, or even in these panels here that are for the I guess the second windows, the quarter windows, if you have a soft the convertible top. I don't really want to do that. This Jeep, you know, I don't want to cut any more holes in it than I have to, and I kind of like the idea of it being not original, but original in style, I guess, and in spirit, as it were. So this is the speaker I settled on. It was like 45 bucks or something, and they had one that was actually smaller, like a 4x8, I think it was, but it would actually cost more. So I got this one. Let's see if we can get it to come out here. Okay, this is what you get in the box. So you get a speaker. This is actually a stereo speaker. So there's two hookups on the back of it, left and right. And that was one of the reasons I got it. So it's a stereo speaker in one package. Granted, it's not going to sound as good as a actual stereo set of speakers, but for 45 bucks, it fit the bill. Comes with some adapter cables, so if you're using, I believe it's more like a factory setup or an 8-ohm setup. Installation hardware, this is if you're going to be, like I said earlier, if I was going to be reusing that cardboard piece, or some little speed nuts or whatever these things are called, and then the screws. I'm not going to use that, mainly because this speaker is too big. I don't know what size speaker was in here, but yeah, I mean, it covers up like a quarter of the speaker. So it wouldn't fit, even if I did want to use it. And then it comes with the actual speaker wires. So those are going to hook onto the speaker and then go into the wiring harness for the radio. And then it comes with a little installation guide here. One thing that it did come with, I don't know if this is the case every time, or if it just happened to be the kit I ordered came with it, but this little installation bracket, I guess we could call it. It's just the same thing they use for the radio. It's just a piece of metal and you bend it to shape. I've already kind of bent it, and the idea is that the speaker sits right there on the middle. From behind, there's a hole in the back with a nut or a screw in it. So you screw that in right there, and then this sits against the inside of the dash. Those posts are going to be kind of like that, and then you just screw, or I had to go buy nuts and washers and stuff because none of the original hardware's in there. But I found the right size that'll thread onto those studs that are in the dash behind there, and I'm going to hopefully fasten this down to those, like cross it like that, or maybe like that, because the ignition switch is awfully close. And doing that, in testing it even, I shorted out the switch. There's a lot of exposed contacts on that, so yeah, lesson learned. But probably going to run it more like that, so this is up above the ignition and not really close to it, so if it does walk around, it's not hopefully going to hit it. Now after this is plugged in, I think I'll move on to the wiring, but let's see if we can get this in there. I test fit it the other day, and it is an incredibly tight fit. There's a lot more stuff in there than there was when I got it. All the wiring has been tucked back in. So it's gone from being nice and roomy to being quite cramped in there. So let's get on that and see what we can do, and then maybe we'll get that in and we can get the wiring done next. Okay, so the speaker is in. You'll have to take my word for it. Unless maybe you can see it in there. Like I said, tight squeeze. But it's in there. Ashtray works. I got to get all this wiring back up under there because that was sitting in this cavity where the speaker goes. I'm starting working on this part, the actual speaker wires. The instructions are actually pretty neat. They've actually given you different terminal sizes. So the large terminal is positive, small terminal is negative. So that's good. In addition to that, they're also using a black and a black with a white stripe. The black with the white stripe being positive, the solid black being negative. So that's cool. I won't have to crawl up under the dash and try to figure out which is which. I'll just plug it in and let the wires dangle. I'll mark the left and the right one. Something else I just noticed is if camera will focus camera. There you go. They pre-tend these wires for solder. Kind of neat. Is it, you know, it's easy enough to do it yourself, but I just thought that was kind of a nice little finish touch on these. So one less thing to have to worry about when I start soldering this together is I can just go. I don't have to tin them. All right, so the radio's in, speaker's in. Next part's going to be to wire it. So the wiring harness, like I showed you earlier in the video, has 2 connectors on it. Or I guess there's 3 connectors. One plugs into the back of the radio, and then there's a connector for power and a connector for the speaker setup. I'm not going to be using all of those. There's stuff in there for like power antennas and external amplifiers and stuff. I'm only going to need 3 of the power wires. So there's a 12-volt switched, which I'm going to try to get off of the ignition switch off the accessory side. I think the accessories on that switch are full, but I'm going to take it down in a second. Look, it needs constant 12-volt. I'm going to also try to get that off of the switch. If not, I'll run a wire up to the fuse, or yeah, the fuse that's up there, or circuit breaker, I guess, not really a fuse, circuit breaker. That will mean I'll have to get some extra wire, but I've got plenty of that. And then the last thing is it needs a ground. So there's a ground right here. On the other side of that is where the blower motor grounds. So I'm going to reuse that one because that's right next to the radio. That's plenty of wire. And again, I'm going to try to do everything off of the switch, and then I can probably get away with the lengths of wire that are already there and not have to extend them, which would be ideal. I don't want to have to solder together a mangled harness. But, you know, like I said, they've already pre-tended the wires. They're assuming you're going to have to solder something. And then after that, it's need to get the antenna installed. You can see mine's a little worse for wear. So I'll go get that and put that on. And then this is the antenna wire. The new antenna is going to come with a new wire. And then I'll be set. I should have a radio, and we'll see how it sounds and works and all that good stuff. All right, so we've changed locations. I checked the ignition switch. I just pulled it down. I do have that terminal right there is 12-volt accessory. There is no 12-volt constant on there except for the one battery feed. I could have sworn there was, but doesn't seem to be. No big deal. So what I'm going to do, there's the circuit breaker that's up on the firewall in there. I'm just going to run a new wire for that. I've got this red wire that I'm going to use. Soldering iron's heating up, and I'm going to throw this little blue crimp connector on here with some heat shrink to keep it all nice and clean. I'll bolt that up, and then I'll stretch this out as far as I need to go and cut it to length. And I can get the harness and stuff. The radio's in the car. I'll get that all squared away, and then we'll have our power. And then I'll work on getting the terminal put on the 12-volt switch. I'll probably use one of these to go on the ignition switch, and again, it'll be heat shrunk to keep it from touching. And I'm going to put some heat shrink on that battery positive too, because it's bare and it's shorted out twice under the dash while I was working on it. Electrocuted me once, so I'm going to clean that up, see while I'm in there. And then we'll see where this goes next. Hopefully no fires. Well, except for that fire, that's supposed to be there. But no fires in there. All right, here's my power wire. I've gone ahead and crimped this on. I tinned the tip of the wire and just threw a little bit of solder on there just to make sure that's a good solid connection. And I already put my heat shrink on here, so when I cut it and I forget to put it on before I put the other connector on, it's already on there. Worst case, I have two, because I always forget that. Nothing better than cutting your wire, crimp your connector on, marvel at how great you are at soldering, and then realize you didn't put your heat shrink on there. So I'm gonna crawl up into there for the 33rd time today and put this on the circuit breaker on the protected side, not the battery positive side, but the side on the inside of the circuit breaker, just in case. And then run this out, see how much I need. Cut it, solder it, same thing. I'll stick to this one. It's going to have a different kind of connector on it, so I'll probably do, you know, either a connector so I can disconnect it from the harness, or just solder it directly to the harness, the radio harness. And we'll see how that goes. I'll decide once I get it plumbed in. All right, so you can see what circuit breaker I'm talking about. You've probably seen it before, and if you have a Commando, you know what it is. But if you don't, instead of having a fuse panel like most any other car on the planet, Jeep decided to make a little fuse block in there, and all it is a circuit breaker. So the battery comes in that side. You can either hook up to the battery positive side, or the side on the inside of the circuit breaker is actually protected by the breaker. So that's, you can see that's what I've hooked my wire to. So I'm going to tighten that little guy down right there, tighten him down, and then run my wire. It's only got to go over to right there, and I'll just run it up over all this other mess. And then yeah, that should be that. And then on to getting the 12-volt accessory wire hooked up, which I'm hoping will be short enough run that I can just run it directly down. And this is what I'm talking about, heat shrinking the connector. I'm going to put a little heat shrink on it here, and then I'll do the same thing. This is the 12-volt battery feed coming in. I really need to put a new wire in here, but another day. At least I'll pull this off and put some heat shrink on it for the very least, so it'll not short out, because this is sorting out on everything I touch under there. It's not ideal. That wire is run. It is tightened in place. Now the next step, we've got our harness that plugs into the radio. So this is just going to plug right into the back of there. This guy's going to dangle. This plugs in. So that bottom one goes in right there. And then this is, let's see, it says on the diagram here. You can read along with me if you want. Yellow is 12-volt constant. So this is going to get hooked up to my red wire and either soldered together, or I'll put I guess I'll just solder it, because this comes unplugged from the harness, so there's no reason to put another connection in there. So I'm going to solder this directly to that once I cut it to length. So you can see blue is for power antenna, don't have one of those. Red is for ignition accessory. So yeah, this red one will have to reach down to that port. And then the black goes to ground, which, as I said, is right here. There's a nut on the other side of that. So yeah, let's get working on that. See how much space I have, and then I'll cut that, solder it, and get that part done, and then we'll go from there. Alrighty. Step one, complete, kind of. That is soldered together with heat shrink. Nice solid connection. I left the wiring diagram on the wire because later on, if I need to reference it, it's nice to have that on the wiring harness. Looking at how long this is, the harness comes down. I'm gonna have to extend to this red wire. There's no way I'm gonna be able to put a connector on that and reach all the way over to here without pulling this wire super tight. And now that there's a speaker and a radio in here, I don't have room to just run across. It's gonna have to kind of come around and in the back. So I think I'm gonna take some more of this red wire and put like 8 inches on it or something, maybe just double it. So it's gonna be thin wire, just like this was, soldered to the thicker wire, and then I'll put a blue terminal connector on it, hook it on right there, and then I have my power supply fixed, and then we'll do ground. I think ground will be long enough to reach, but if not, I may need to find some other place in the dash to ground it without having to come down here. Like we can ground it up here somewhere. There's I could even ground it to the radio or the speaker mounting studs that are back here. There's 2 spare ones now because that brace kind of goes from here to here. So there's a stud here and a stud here that aren't being used. So in theory, I could use that as a ground too. I just need to put a little ring terminal on it. All right, getting closer to hearing some tunes. Yeah. Here's my 12 volt accessory switched. There we go. Heat shrunk. Next gonna go on right there. My power feed. There were 2 bare spots in it, here and here. So I went ahead and put 3 pieces of heat shrink on that all the way up to here. And it's spliced way up there, so at some point I need to actually run this back to the circuit breaker and cut it and just make a new wire, because this is getting kind of shady. But, you know, so that's gonna plug back in there. And by the way, the battery is unhooked, by the way. I learned my lesson after the second time being electrocuted. So that's gonna plug back in there. That'll be our power wiring. And like I said, we got our ground to figure out, this black wire. And then from there, I'm gonna throw a piece of heat shrink on each one of these. Actually, that's already got heat shrink on it, never mind. They're smart. Ow. That soldering iron is still hot, by the way. If you're wondering to yourself, is that hot? The answer is yes. The wires that they don't think you'll need are already pre-heat shrunk. Huh, I didn't notice that till now. So I'm not gonna worry about those. Those are gonna stay as is. This is gonna get, right here, and you can see it touch the soldering iron, and now it's melted. Great. Exceptional wiring. It's my expertise. I'm gonna hook that up to ground to keep that away from the hot soldering iron. And from there, we will do the same thing for the speakers. All right, final look at this before it goes up in the dash. All that's hooked up. I'm just gonna plug that back into the hole and then tuck all these in wherever they'll go. Here's my ground. I went ahead and just put a spade terminal on it, put some heat shrink on it so it's black instead of the red terminal. And I've confirmed that it will not reach down here, not without stretching it. So rather than extend it, there's a stud you can't see, but it's like right there for the speaker, the top speaker stud. So I'm just gonna screw it down to that. That should be fine. The dashboard's grounded. I mean, I've been using various bits and pieces of the dashboard for ground for a while. So worst case, if it doesn't work, I'll cut the wire. I'll cut this off and extend it, but I'm gonna try just keeping it short and everything kind of tucked in up here. And then we're on to speaker wires, and I know earlier I was talking about how awesome it is that these are pre-tenned for you. But they're real wires, but you know, the tips have been tenned, not pretend wires. Pre-tenned. But I mean, that's way too long. It only needs to be about that long. So I'm either gonna cut it and just, I don't know, like, I'm gonna have to solder it. This is the speaker harness, and I only need, I think, the purple and the gray. They don't have rear speakers. So what do we have here? We have the purple and the green are the rear, so I need gray and white. So the gray and the white are the ones I'm going to be using, so I'm going to have to solder those together anyway. These are just going to I'll heat shrink over the gap or push the wires back together so they're not bare, and then solder these together. So yeah, I'm gonna have to cut this anyway. Okay, speaker wiring. See how short I cut it. And then I staggered the cuts on this so that there weren't two connections right next to each other. So one of them's here and one of them's up here. And then I put a big piece of heat shrink over. So there's heat shrink on each connection and then a big piece of heat shrink over the pair. But I suck at measuring, so there's an extra little bit. But anyway, that's fine. So now that's our front right, and now I need the white one for the front left. So I'm going to get that side over there. I'll cut it the same way. There's going to be a little bit of extra, but I wanted room because this is designed to be unplugged, and I want to make sure that I can unplug it, get it out of the way entirely, and not have wires pulled tight. And I started getting some of the wires tucked back up in there for the radio, but that power wire right there is still way too long. So I have to fiddle with that. But getting closer. That's one of the two. And once this is done, we can install the antenna, get our cable routed, and then plug the battery back in and hope that nothing blows up, because I've done a lot of wiring under here today, and we'll see. I'm sure it'll be fine. Yeah, what's the worst that could happen, right? Everything's wired in, but now I've run into a snag. When I hook the battery up, I get a big spark. So something is shorting somewhere. I've disconnected my new power wire from right here. This is for the radio. That's gonna go over here. I also disconnected the main power plug, and you can see this wire is just about shot. I don't quite know where that goes, but I need to fix it. This is my new power wire right here. That's for the tachometer. I forget what that's for. Probably a neutral safety. Can't remember what half of this stuff does. I did disconnect this to make a little extra space. All right, well, I'm gonna fiddle with this. That plugged in right on one of these things. This plugged into here, these two. So I guess I'm gonna back troubleshoot this a little and see what happened. I didn't smell any smoke or anything, but something's definitely unhappy under here. Okay, so I found the problem. So it wasn't really a problem so much as the radio being plugged in was making it spark because it pulls power. I was testing to make sure by using the fan, and it didn't work, and it kind of made me worried, but it's because this plug had come undone. This is the accessory power to the fan. This goes to the neutral safety switch. Well, guess what this was plugged into? My radio. That was plugged in where the fan had come unplugged. Because I could have sworn that I'd used all of these accessory ports and was surprised that one was open. It's because the fan had come unplugged when I pulled the switch down. So now I'm gonna have to find another 12-volt switch source for this. I'm thinking about tapping these together. I hate doing that, but I don't know how else to do it, short of, you know, coming into the harness somewhere else. And I would rather the splice be right here where it's easy to see and not buried somewhere else in the harness. So I may have to cut this wire, put them together, and then put them in another connector, tape them really well so they stay together. It's fine. Or maybe this is backup lights. I don't remember what this was, but it goes into the neutral safety switch. But anyway, it's sending power into the switch either way, I think. We'll see. I'll figure it out. But I gotta figure out what to do with this too. Okay, so that is in. I went ahead and installed the ignition switch. What I ended up doing was taking my power wire here and splicing it, or combining it with the wire going to the neutral safety switch, and put a new plug on them. I just cut the wires connectors off, put a new plug on it, soldered it, heat shrunk it, good to go. Battery's hooked up, and now it's on accessory power. I can't play it because YouTube content match, but there you go. It works. It gets plenty loud. It does sound funny with just one speaker there, but it sounds okay. It gets plenty loud enough. So now I need to program it and all that stuff. Instructions have all that detail in them. And then I need to clean all this wiring up, tuck it up, electrical tape it, tuck it up under the dash. And then I've got, once again, like everything I do, every project generates so much trash. That's all wire, chunks of burnt solder. But yeah, right now I gotta go cook dinner. So I'm gonna do that, but hopefully tomorrow I'll get the antenna put on, get that wire run, and then I can actually clean all this wiring up, and then we'll be good to go. All right, it's another day, and I got the wiring cleaned up. Only took about 2 hours. There's not much space under there, and it's spaghetti. But battery's hooked up. It's been hooked up for about 5 minutes. Nothing's caught on fire yet. Radio still works, car still starts, blower motor still works. Everything seems to work. So I'm going to keep moving. Next part is the antenna. So I ordered this a long time ago, probably 2 years ago now. But this is the base, and it matches what's on the car or Jeep. This was, I think, for a Ford Bronco, it said, but who cares? I don't want to have to drill into the hole in the cowl. And this is exactly, or a replica of what's on there now. I don't know if it's the same one or not, but this is the part number, and then the actual antenna itself, which my Jeep doesn't currently have. Part number for that, if you're interested. So, today is nuts. You have to kind of reach up in the cavity in there to get the dash, or behind the dash to get the wiring loose. And then this little mount is in there. I don't know how well I'll be able to show you that, but I'll take it apart and I'll show you what it looks like once I get it out. It's gonna look a lot like this one. That's what it looks like in the cowl. You can see there's the air box right there. So this is about where it is. It's right there. And then that's the top side of it. So that's why I'm replacing it. It's all destroyed. So we gotta loosen this top cap up, I believe, and it'll come off, and then you can take the whole assembly out, drop a new one in, do the same thing. So I'm gonna go find a wrench to fit on this, and then take it out and go from there. And there it is. There's the hole that left. Look how pretty that paint is. That's not true. Looks like somebody might have drilled this out with just one drill bit, doing like thousands of holes. And here's the gasket bit. This little trim piece. That just screws onto that thing. And the little feet on it to hold it straight. And then the speaker wire, or the antenna wire. So I'm gonna grab the new one. It'll be the reverse, and then I'll show you when it's done. Something I just remembered, when you don't have a glove box, you can just peek right in there. So much easier to put your arm in here than it is up under. Anyway, so this guy is on. The neat thing about this thing is you can kind of adjust how it turns. Well, if you can, I don't know. I may have to tweak it. But anyway, it's on. I'm gonna fiddle with it and then screw the antenna on, and we'll be done. All right, there it is. Done. Doing some finagling to kind of keep it semi-straight. And I got it in there pretty tight. It kept wanting to move on me. It's not perfectly straight up and down, but close enough. I adjusted as much as I could. There's just no more room in it. And let's see, the radio, you can see it's on and working just fine. Turn that down. But yeah, everything's working. You see the antenna wire, the This comes right across. I've got it sitting on top of the blower motor. Right now it's running under the defroster ducting, but I'll put it over the top of that just so it's a little cleaner. And there you can kind of see the speaker, the radio up in there, and the mess of wiring that it generated. All in all, pretty happy with it. Need to use it for a bit to kind of see, read the instructions, figure out how to program it and all that stuff. Gonna get that cleaned up and then we'll wrap up this video. All right, that's our radio install. Thanks for coming along for the ride. I've never done this before, so at least not installed this radio in a Jeep Commando. So still got some tidying up to do with the wiring, I believe. But all in all, everything's tucked up in the dashboard. Radio works, speaker works, antenna's installed. So I think it's good enough. We're just gonna leave it the way it is for now. I'm gonna drive it around, have some fun with it, and yeah, until next time, take care.